Europe had barely begun to absorb the shockwaves from the fall of Ireland and Germany's stunning insertion of troops into Scotland. For a brief moment, capitals across the continent held their breath, unsure whether this was the beginning of a new Cold War or the ignition of something far more violent. The collapse of Dublin, the rapid occupation of Irish territory, and the quiet but alarming German presence north of Hadrian's Line all pointed toward a reality that could no longer be ignored. The balance of power in Europe was cracking, and France was no longer willing to watch it crumble from the sidelines. Paris had been watching everything with growing impatience. They had warned, negotiated, attempted to mediate, and even offered behind-the-scenes restraints to Germany. But after Ireland fell and Germany made its boldest move yet by transporting airborne and mechanized units into Scotland under a secret agreement, France reached a turning point. The line had been crossed. The time to intervene had arrived. A message was dispatched to London, urgent, concise, and unmistakably serious. Paris, London. The situation can no longer be tolerated. We must act. London barely hesitated. Despite bruised pride and exhausted forces still stretching themselves thin across Northern Ireland, and recently Ireland itself, the United Kingdom responded with unmistakable clarity. London, Paris. We agree. Begin your advance. We will move in the north. And just like that, the next phase of the conflict began. Unlike earlier phases of the conflict, France did not need to assemble forces from deep within its territory. During the previous escalation, French armored brigades and mechanized infantry had already been deployed all along the Belgian frontier. Defensive lines, logistics hubs, and staging areas were already built. The engines were warm, units were rested, the troops were waiting. So when the order came, France didn't mobilize. It advanced. No dramatic columns forming, no long convoys racing across highways. They were already there. The French saw an opportunity not only to apply pressure on German lines, but also to liberate a European ally and reclaim a critical corridor. As French forces crossed into Belgian territory, the distant thunder of artillery welcomed them. German units entrenched around Brussels were prepared for a fight. They weren't numerous, not compared to the advancing French divisions. But what they lacked in manpower they compensated for with discipline and well-positioned fortifications. The outskirts of Brussels erupted with the frantic crackle of small arms fire, the boom of anti-tank weapons, the deep tremor of armored vehicles pushing against each other. The battle was fierce. Streets that once bustled with life became corridors of smoke and bursting concrete. German commanders executed delaying tactics with precision, pulling their lines back block by block, turning entire neighborhoods into tactical choke points. French infantry advanced cautiously behind mobile shields of armor, taking intersections one at a time. The clash dragged on for hours, an exhausting, grinding confrontation. But in the end, the numbers told the story. The French war machine, larger and far better supplied, pressed the German battalions into an impossibly tight circle around key government buildings. And when the French finally breached the last defensive perimeter, the remaining German soldiers pulled back, disappearing into pre-planned evacuation routes. Brussels fell not with a sudden collapse, but with a slow, painful defeat. A battle heavy enough to matter, but not decisive enough to be remembered as the war's turning point. Belgium's independence was restored that very evening. French officers stood beside members of the Provisional Belgian Authority as the country's flag once again flew over the city. Paris celebrated cautiously. Brussels was secured, but the operation had revealed something unsettling. Germany didn't react. No retaliation, no reinforcement, no counterattack. Just silence. Silence from Berlin was never a good sign. France understood this, and so did London. If Germany wasn't responding to the loss of Brussels, then they were preparing something bigger, something elsewhere. Paris ordered its generals to plan a more audacious strike, one meant to shake Germany at its core. But even as those plans began forming, attention shifted back to the British Isles, where the United Kingdom was preparing for its most important battle since the war began. London, Paris. We move on Edinburgh. If Germany plans something larger, it starts here. With both sides aligned, preparations intensified across the theater, setting the stage for what comes next. Paris to London. Brussels is secured. Finish it. The German contingent in Scotland wasn't enormous, but it was dangerous. They had transported a capable mix of airborne infantry, mechanized units, and specialized recon teams. Rapid response forces meant to influence, not conquer. And with the Scottish regional leadership cooperating in exchange for political concessions, German forces were entrenched near Edinburgh, establishing temporary strongholds in key towns and strategic ridges. This wouldn't be a small operation. The UK knew it. They began massing troops northward, moving divisions that had fought in Ireland, redeploying armored brigades that had originally been destined for defensive duties elsewhere, and reassigning air units to establish air superiority over central Scotland. The roads leading to Edinburgh shook beneath the weight of British armor. Mobile artillery was positioned behind natural cover. Infantry battalions dug in, and reconnaissance teams charted every inch of the woodland and hills surrounding the capital. Then just before dawn, the offensive began. It started with the distant echo of artillery, rolling like a storm over the fields. UK forces advanced steadily, pushing toward the defensive German-Scottish perimeter. Smoke marked the horizon. Anti-armor missiles streaked through the early morning haze. German forces countered quickly, their mechanized infantry exploiting the terrain to strike at British flanks, their airborne units launching fast surprise maneuvers from concealed positions. The fighting around Edinburgh became brutal. Close quarters clashes in industrial zones, armored duels on rural roads, infantry exchanging fire across farmland walls and narrow forest paths. Scottish separatist forces added chaos, fighting not with uniform doctrine but with a desperate determination, fueled by the promise Germany had whispered into their leadership. Autonomy, recognition, freedom. But promises don't win battles. Numbers, coordination, and experience do. British armored columns continued forcing their way forward, overwhelming isolated German pockets. Air support hammered defensive lines, clearing routes for infantry advances. German command began to crack under the weight of the assault. Their casualty rate rose sharply, their supply lines thinned, their defensible positions shrank. By late afternoon, the decisive moment arrived. British forces breached the final defensive ridgeline outside Edinburgh, routing the last major German formation. What remained of the German forces scattered in retreat. The battle was over. The United Kingdom had reclaimed Scotland. By evening, London announced that Scotland was once again under UK control, though new restrictions and direct oversight would be imposed until stability could be guaranteed. It wasn't a victory the UK celebrated loudly, but it was a victory nonetheless, a hard-won, meaningful triumph in a war that had offered them few moments to breathe. And across the Channel, France watched with approval. Their operations in Brussels had succeeded. The UK had secured the north. Together, they had delivered the first serious blow to Germany since the conflict began. The Franco-British alliance, long strained by years of political disagreements, suddenly stood stronger than ever. But Germany's silence remained the darkest cloud over Europe. Berlin had yet to speak. No threats, no warnings, no retaliation, just quiet, cold, calculating quiet. And both Paris and London knew exactly what that meant. Germany hadn't been defeated. They were planning their next move. The biggest battle of the war might come much sooner than anyone expected.